What's up, Taiwan? I'm Louise with 10 minutes of news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan has featured heavily in talks between US President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Bali ahead of a G20 summit. It's the first time the two leaders have met in person since Biden took office. John Van Trieste reports.
Two of the world's most powerful leaders face to face. US President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping sat across from one another for 3 hours ahead of the G20 summit in Bali. Their goal? Boosting a relationship that's become fraught with tension.
As the leaders of our two nations, we share responsibility, in my view, to show that China and the United States can manage our differences, prevent competition from becoming anything ever near conflict, and to find ways to work together on urgent global issues that require our mutual cooperation.
On the agenda, North Korea, Ukraine, and a regular source of friction, Taiwan. Beijing claims Taiwan is part of its territory and has threatened to take the country by force if necessary. The U.S. doesn't officially recognize Taiwan, but under a long-standing treaty, it has the responsibility to help Taiwan defend itself. Biden has recently pledged to defend the island from any attack, a position that has rankled Beijing. This is the first face-to-face meeting between Biden and Xi as presidents, and their first talks since China launched military exercises around Taiwan in response to a high-level visit by the U.S. House Speaker in August. But despite relations between the two sides being at one of their lowest points, both sides were conciliatory. Despite predictions from U.S. officials that China may be speeding up plans to take Taiwan, and Xi describing Taiwan as a red line, Biden has expressed confidence that the status quo will hold.
And I do not think there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan. And I made it clear that our policy on Taiwan has not changed at all. It's the same exact position we've had. I made it clear that we want to see cross-strait issues peacefully resolved, and so it never has to come to that.
Biden said the meeting had not resolved the many points of friction in U.S.-China ties, but he said the two sides will set up a dialogue mechanism for resolving issues. And with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken set to travel to China soon, there are signs tensions may be cooling for now. Howard Zhang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Relatives of a Taiwanese volunteer fighter killed in Ukraine joined a memorial ceremony in the West Ukrainian city of Lviv on Monday. 25-year-old Sung Sheng-guang from Taiwan's eastern Hualien County died earlier this month in fighting against Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. He was a member of a Ukrainian military unit made up of foreign volunteers as well as local fighters. Taiwan's foreign ministry has praised what it called Sung's warrior spirit and sacrifice for the cause of liberty. Taiwan ranks in the bottom 10 nations for climate change performance. That's according to an index released by a German NGO ahead of the UN climate conference later this week. Germanwatch ranked a total of 59 countries based on their greenhouse gas emissions, renewable energy use, and overall climate policy. Taiwan scored poorly, behind large polluters such as the United States and China, due to its reliance on fossil fuels and lack of a clear pathway to phasing out oil and gas. But Taiwan's Environmental Protection Administration rejected the ranking, saying the government has already published a plan for net zero emissions by 2050. The world's population has hit a new milestone. The United Nations estimates that the number of people living in the world passed the 8 billion mark on Tuesday. It's been only 11 years since the population reached 7 billion. But the growth rate is starting to slow down. Projections say the next billion won't happen for another 15 years. And while the number of the people across the planet is growing, the population here in Taiwan has already begun to shrink. To find out more on what's causing this, reporter Eric Gao spoke with Yanxin Cheng, a research fellow with Academia Sinica.
So what are the factors behind the difference between the world continuing to grow in population while Taiwan is seeing a shrinking?
So this is largely caused by the population that is still growing in the developing nations. And these nations actually have a larger share of the global population, and they still have quite high total fertility rate as opposed to the developed nations. So basically what I'm saying is that the reality, quote unquote, that we are experiencing around us is not the same thing as what people are going through in, let's say, in India or in many countries in Africa. Population there are still growing faster than East Asia, the America, or Europe.
For Taiwan's recent decline in population, some analysts have said it has to do with the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you explain how that contributed to Taiwan's shrinking population?
Before the pandemic, the population and fertility rate in Taiwan has already been on the decline for a long time. The pandemic just sort of adds to the long-term decrease in total fertility rate. And why is that? Because when people are faced with uncertainties, often they postpone or they avoid from having more children, postpone their fertility plan. But you see that across the globe, in Europe, in the US, and in Taiwan, all these countries that went through the pandemic all have lower fertility than the level they experienced prior to the pandemic.
Here in Taiwan, when we talk about the shrinking and aging population, one of the top concerns is economic, that we'll have a smaller workforce in the future. But aside from that, is there anything else that policymakers should be more concerned about, in your opinion?
We're going to see a shrinking share of the youth population or young adult population in the coming decade, and a growing share of the older or senior or the elderly population. And this is going to translate into the population composition of the voting population. So it's going to shift the decision makers, quote unquote. So what policymakers and governments should pay attention to is how can we ensure the younger generation's voices and then their needs and their aspiration can be properly addressed.
Basketball star Dwight Howard is training hard for his first game in Taiwan. The Taoyuan Leopards have released a video of the newly arrived players' workout ahead of Saturday's match against the new Taipei DEAs. Howard is an NBA champion and 8-time All-Star, but the LA Lakers didn't re-sign him after last season. Well, their loss is now Taiwan's gain. He arrived in Taiwan last week after being signed by the Leopards. Tickets for his first 4 games have all sold out. Fishers on Taiwan's outlying Penghu Islands are preparing for a busy winter season. As temperatures start to drop, migratory fish are making their way to the waters around Penghu. Their arrival has brought out fishing enthusiasts looking to make big catches. The Chinese drum and greater amberjack are among the most sought-after species, and those coming out to cast a line can also make good money.
这个鲶鱼是最昂贵的鱼，它以这个体型10公斤的鲶鱼来讲的话，一条啊都到卖价都在7、8千块左右。那也只有这个季节最肥美，那就大家都会来这边钓鱼。
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we leave you with images of a Chinese alligator at Taipei Zoo. He's not doing terribly much. I'm Louise Watt. Take care, and I'll see you next time.